Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you Fargo? You can in the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Head trauma and mental health. Is getting hit in the head causing a mental health illness? Welcome to Anxious Black Belt podcast. I'm your host, Les Bubka. A few years ago, in our club, we decided to change the way we train because of the studies coming out about the brain injury and results of continuous impact to the head. So we've been experimenting with different approaches. At first, we changed the heavy contact without the headgear. We added a headgear, but then the boxing organizations and studies on boxing shown that actually wearing a headgear can cause more shaking of the brain. So we decided to stop using a headgear and went into the light contact. And at the moment, we're using a very light contact to the head in sparring. I know that there are some people saying that this is not very realistic and you need some degree of being hit in the head with a contact. I kind of don't agree with that, and we can see that more of fighters, both in boxing, MMA, going away from the heavy sparring, heavy contact, and taking care of their brains. We see that as well in Muay Thai when all the sparrings are super light and playful. And as we know, Thai fighters having a lot of professional fights, up to 400 fights, when they really try to take their heads off. So if they are sparring lightly, I don't see the reason why we shouldn't spar lightly. And taking consideration that we all have families, regular jobs, and are not a professional fighters, I think we should take care of our brains and minimize the effects on it. So if you're not paid millions, I don't think so you should be hitting the head hard. Although the light contact might be accumulating some damage as well. We try to mitigate that with a gloves and really paying attention to the light contact and more focusing on body shots and controlling our fighting. As well, in terms of actually practicing the power punches and heavy blows, we've got equipment for that, so you can perfectly use the modern devices. You want to hit really hard, you've got the bags, you've got a pad holders, you've got Thai pads, big shields, where you can go full power, full speed without the danger of causing injury to your partner and receiving injury yourself. This is the as well important part that everybody is safe. So not only taking a care of your partner, but yourself as well. But here I would like to focus on the studies and evidence that the traumatic brain injury can cause mental health issues. And suggestion is that after a traumatic brain injury, you might develop an anxiety, depression, and a few other mental health illnesses or disorders, if you prefer. But let's start with what is traumatic injury. So, traumatic brain injury usually results from a violent blow or jolt to the head or body. An object that goes through brain tissue, such as bullet or shattered piece of a skull, can also cause traumatic brain injury. Mild traumatic brain injury may affect your brain cells temporarily. More serious traumatic brain injury can result in a bruising, torn tissues, bleeding, and other physical damages to the brain. These injuries can result in long-term complication or death. And the symptoms of a brain injury are wide-ranging, physical and psychological. Some signs or symptoms might appear immediately after the traumatic event, while others may appear days or weeks later. Physical symptoms include headache, nausea or vomiting, fatigue, drowsiness, problems with speech, dizziness, or loss of balance. Sensory problems such as blurred vision, ringing in the ears, and bad taste in the mouth, or changes in the ability to smell. Light or sound sensitivity, cognitive, behavioral, or mental symptoms. Loss of consciousness, few seconds to a few minutes. Without loss of consciousness, but a state of being dazed, confused, or disorientated. Concentration problems, memory problems, mood swings, mood changes, feeling depressed or anxious. Problems with sleeping or sleeping more than usual. The moderate or moderate to severe traumatic brain injury can include any of the signs and symptoms of mild injury, as well as these symptoms that might appear within the first hour to days after head injury. Those include physical symptoms, loss of consciousness from minutes to hours, headaches or headaches that worsen, repeated vomiting or nausea, seizures, convulsions, dilation of one or both pupils of the eyes, fluid draining from ears or the nose, that would be a clear fluid, inability to wake up from the sleep, weakness in fingers and toes, also a numbness in them, and loss of coordination. Cognitive or mental symptoms, confusion, agitation, combativeness, slur speech, coma, other disorders of consciousness. Let's have a look on some causes of a traumatic brain injury. Common events causing traumatic brain injury can include falls. It can be from the bed or a ladder. In our cases, it can be from the throw, from a trip, maybe vehicle collisions, so involving cars, motorcycles, and bicycles, from a violence, so gunshot wounds, domestic violence, children abuse, or other assaults. Shaken baby syndrome is a traumatic brain injury in infants caused by a violent shaking. And here's our kind of area of interest. So the sports injuries may be caused by injuries from a number of sports, including soccer, so being hit by the ball or headbutting the ball, boxing, obviously taking lots of hits to the head, baseball, I imagine that being hit in the head or through securing the base when you fell over and jumping in. Hockey, they fight as well a lot. You can fall over on when you're skating, and other high impact sports. There be explosions, blasts, so that's a kind of a army related stuff. The military personnel. And other activities that are a regular thing. So you might walk into something, might fell over, sleep. For those who live in a colder climate, you can sleep on the ice and fell over and bump your head and so on. And there's a complications to the brain injury. So altered consciousness. I can't speak properly. Consciousness. Um, that can be a permanent changes in a person's state of consciousness, awareness, or responsiveness. Different states of consciousness include coma. A person in coma is unconscious, unaware of anything, and unable to respond to any stimulus. This results from a widespread damage to all parts of the brain. After a few days to a few weeks, a person might emerge from a coma or enter the vegetative state. We've seen that a few times in the boxing. There is few sad cases when people been hit, have a concussion, brain hemorrhaging, and ending up in a coma. Some of people return from coma to sort of normal life. The others are heavily impacted by it and barely function normally. And the other one ended up in a vegetative state. So that's caused by widespread damage to the brain, resulting in a vegetative state. Although the person is unaware of surrounding, he or she may open his eyes, make sounds, respond to reflexes, or move. It is possible that the vegetative state can become permanent, but often individuals progress to a minimally conscious state. And there is as well boxing example of that, which is very sad. Minimally consciousness state. A minimally conscious state is a condition of a severely altered consciousness, but with some sign of self-awareness or awareness of one's environment. It is sometimes a transitional state from a coma or vegetative condition to a greater recovery, so people can recover. Brain death is where there is no measurable activity in the brain and the brainstem. This is called brain death. In a person who has been declared brain dead, removal of a breathing devices will result in cessation of breathing and eventual heart failure. Brain death is considered irreversible. Physical complications, seizures. Some people with traumatic brain injury will develop seizures. They may occur only in the early stages or years after the injury. Recurrent seizures are called post-traumatic epilepsy. Fluid building up in the brain. Cerebrospinal fluid might build up in the spaces in the brain. Infections. The skull fractures or penetrating wounds can be tear to a layer of the protective tissue that surrounds the brain. This can enable bacteria to enter the brain and cause infections. Blood vessels damage. Several small or large blood vessels in the brain may be damaged in the traumatic brain injury. This damage could lead to a stroke, blood clot, or other problems. Headaches are very common after traumatic brain injury. They may begin with a week after injury and could persist for as long as several months. Vertigo, many people experience this condition, characterizing by the dizziness after a traumatic brain injury. So this is from a website, mayoclinic.org, so I'm kind of reading it out. And there are also intellectual problems. Many people who have had a significant brain injury will experience changes in their thinking. Cognitive skills, it may be more difficult to focus and take longer to process your thought. Traumatic brain injury can result in problems with many skills, including cognitive problems, memory, learning, reasoning, judgment, attention or concentration. Executive functions problem. problem solving, multitasking, organizing, planning, decision making, beginning of a competing task. It can be also a communication problem. Language and communication problem are common following traumatic brain injuries. These problems can cause frustration, conflict, and misunderstanding for people with a traumatic brain injury, as well as family members, friends, and care providers. There can be communication problems, including difficulty understanding speech or writing, difficulty speaking or writing, inability to organize thoughts and ideas, trouble following and participating in conversation. Communication problems that affect social skills may include trouble with turn taking or topic selection in conversations, problem with changes in tone, pitch, or emphasis to express emotions, attitudes, or subtle differences in meaning, difficulty understanding nonverbal signals, trouble reading cues from listeners, trouble starting or stopping conversation, inability to use the muscles needed to form words, behavioral changes, difficulty with self control, lack of awareness of abilities, risky behaviors, difficulty in social situations, verbal or physical outbursts, emotional changes. And this is interesting for us: depression and anxiety, mood swings, irritability, lack of empathy for others, anger, insomnia, sensory problems, persistent ringing in the ears, difficulty recognizing objects, impaired hand-eye coordination, blind spot or double vision, bitter taste and bad smell of or difficulty smelling, skin tingling, pain or itching, trouble with balance and or disease. It can also cause a degenerative brain disease like Alzheimer disease, which primarily causes the progressive loss of memory and other thinking skills, Parkinson's disease, a progressive condition that causes movement problems such as tremors, rigidity, and slow movements, dementia, most often associated with repetitive blows to the head in a career boxing, which causes symptoms of dementia and movement problems. So, not a fun stuff. And being a martial artist, we're going into the dojo from once a week to 5, 7 days a week, taking blows in the head. Is it worth it? It might happen, it might not happen, but personally, I don't want to take a risk of that. I like to prevent as much as I can. We can take some steps to prevent those. Seat belts, airbags, alcohol and drug use limited, using helmets for riding motorcycle and stuff like that, paying attention to your surroundings, preventing falls, preventing hand injuries in children. Um, all those we can do, and one of those is limiting the amount of blows you're taking to the head during the training session. Like I said before, we are not a professionals. That is in my case, in my club members, we are not being paid to fight. We're doing it as a hobby, and my idea of hobby is something that brings me pleasure and does not harm me. So it is a easy sparrings for us, not so much head contact, a lot of fun, a lot of respect to the other people. Um, so I'm gonna keep going with this, and we're gonna continue doing like that. But let's have a look on a studies in relation to blows and actual data for the mental health condition. Let's have a look on the study association between traumatic brain injury and mental health care utilization. Evidence from the Canadian Community Health Survey. And this can be found on the Injury Epidemiology journal. I'm going to put the link in the description below. So, the abstract. Background: mental health disorders are a common sequel of traumatic brain injury and are associated with worse health outcomes, including increased mental health care utilization. The objective of this study was to determine the association between TBI and use of mental health services in a population-based sample. Methods: using data from a national Canadian survey, this study evaluated the association between TBI and the mental health care utilization. Results: the study sample, including 158,287 TBA patients and 25,339,930 non-injured individuals, compared with those who were not injured. TBI patients reported higher proportion of chronic mental health conditions, 27 versus 12%, and heavy drinking, 33% versus 24%. The adjusted prevalence of mental health care utilization was 60% higher in patients with TBI than those who were not injured. Conclusion: this study suggests that the chronic mental health conditions and heavy drinking are more common in the individuals with TBI. The prevalence of mental health care utilization is 60% higher in TBA patients compared with those who are not injured after adjusting for sociodemographic factors. Mental health conditions and heavy drinking. Future longitudinal research is required to examine the temporality and direction of the association between TBI and the use of mental health services. Let's have a look on the relation between TBI and depression and anxiety. This is on Model System Knowledge Translation Center. And let's have a look on anxiety is common in the general population and in people with moderate to severe TBI. Anxiety might look different from person to person, but most people with anxiety have intense fear and worry. Some people also have physical signs of anxiety. People with TBI might have anxiety in situations that did not bother them in the past. They may feel anxious being in a crowd, when they are being rushed, or when they are adjusting to sudden changes in plans. They might feel overwhelmed in a situation that require a lot of attention, fast thinking, or processing a lot of information at the same time. People with depression might feel sad, irritable, or worthless. They may feel tired much of the time and may experience changes in sleep or appetite or difficulty concentrating. Some people may even have thoughts of death, hurting themselves, or taking their own life. People with these feelings often withdraw from others and lose interest in or feel less pleasure from activities they used to enjoy. Many signs of depression, such as fatigue and frustration, are also signs of TBI. However, someone with TBI might experience those symptoms but not be depressed. Sadness and grief are common after brain injury. Some people feel depressed right after TBI, but this feeling may also appear during the later stage of recovery. Symptoms of anxiety may appear before depression. If these feelings become overwhelming or interfere with the recovery, the person with TBI might be experiencing depression. Let's have a look what causes the emotional changes after TBI. Emotional changes can occur if the TBI affects areas of the brain that control emotions. Changes to the brain regions and to the chemicals that help the brain work can affect how the person with TBI experiences or expresses emotions. People with TBI might have a hard time coping with the injury. They may need to adjust to a loss of independence or to change to their role in the family and society. These changes can lead to frustration and dissatisfaction with their life. People with TBI may also have changes in their thinking abilities, such as memory, attention, speed of thinking, and reasoning. These changes can cause them to feel overwhelmed if they can't remember things or keep up with what others are doing or saying. They may respond emotionally with sadness, worry, or anger. Use of alcohol or other drugs can lead to emotional changes, and emotional distress may also lead to alcohol and drug use. People who had problems with depression or anxiety before the TBI might find that these problems are worsened after TBI. They may feel isolated, depressed, or misunderstood, which can also affect emotions. So, another fun stuff. Um, well, luckily, I never had a concussion, although been hit in some competitions quite hard in the head. But I think my fear of being judged stopped me from pushing forwards and having more severe head injury. So I can remember one competition where I had a big kick to the head. I stepped back on the mat, ready to fight, but then I had a little bit of a ringing in my ear and spinning in my head, and I decided that it is not worth it, and I pulled out from the fight. And now thinking about it, I'm happy I did that. But at that time, I was thinking that I am a coward and I've been really not happy with myself. But looking at it from the time perspective, it was probably a good decision. I've always been lucky that I'm kind good with keeping the distance and not taking many shots. I'm kind of a defensive fighter, so I'm avoiding most of the hits. Um, and I recommend to my students as well to not get hit. But it's not the fun stuff. The brain injury, concussion can lead to so many problems, as you heard. I read this out. I recommend you to look through those links and read it for yourself, um, and take the decision. I was listening other day to the podcast, and people were arguing about a validity of a training without contact. Um, and I think, yeah, if you're a professional fighter, you need to experience that. If you're a amateur and hobbyist, there's no need of that. The light sparring is enough, and go and test yourself on competitions once a year or so to try to see how it is harder. If the professionals can spar and train easy, so can we. We don't need to be tough and prove anything. I think that's the dojos where are ego driven, where the ego and the coaches allow to escalate stuff, and you see those videos on TikToks, Instagrams, where people just escalating and going from a light sparring to heavy blows and being in disregard to other people's health. Luckily, in our dojo, that doesn't happen. We have a strict control over it, and people understand that the health is more important. And I'm proud that our dojo is not ego driven, and people can assess their health, and they can freely say that, hey, I'm not doing the sparring. I don't feel like I want it. I've got injury, or I just simply don't want to be punched in the face. We all got the um, life outside of the training, and not everybody can walk around with a black eyes, broken nose. Some people got important jobs, like management and stuff, and you cannot come every week with a nose on the back of your head and black eyes and cauliflower ears and stuff like that. So I'm happy that we're doing. I'm totally supporting the movement of children not being hit in the head. My son with his friend are doing trainings with me, and I don't allow them to hit each other in the head. There's no need for that. In terms of self-defense and stuff, the wrestling for age of 7 to 12 is way better, um, and safer. Children's brain still developing, so there is no need to take a risk with even light blows. You don't want a child having a brain injury and experiencing the stuff I've been reading before. They need that then their cognitive functions to be in school, learn, and recovering from a brain injury is not something they need in their life. So this is it from me. Most of it was read out from the studies and websites. I'm gonna put those links down below. I would love to hear what you think about it. What's your approach in your club? If you're a teacher, are you implementing changes, or are you still thinking that um, hits, heavy hits are essential part of learning? How you go about all the topic, and if you wish to share your thoughts, please comment below, or wherever you're listening to it. If you found it on Facebook, please comment there. If you found it on one of your podcast platforms, please maybe leave the voice message or comments. There's many options there. And as always, if you would like to support the show, we are selling now the wonderful mugs, which going really quickly. You can buy us a coffee. You know, me talking here in the evening, I need coffee to be able to read stuff out and formulate words. I hope the sound is better this time. I'm gonna be editing that soon. Um, and I wish you all the best until the next time. Cheerio.
Sports Social Podcast Network.